Welcome back to Queens Behind the Scenes, where we encourage queens to lead, transform, and shine. I'm Charisse, and today we're going to dive into one of the most transformative aspects of your life, which is our relationships. Relationships are like those mirrors reflecting back to us where we were, what we value, and sometimes how much we've grown. Too often we hear the relationship should be easy. I know for myself, I always thought that if there was effort, like why do we have to put in this effort? If it's supposed to be right, it's right, or that the right connection would just fall into place. But the truth is, and what I've learned over the years, is that the most fulfilling relationships that I've had aren't the ones that never face challenges. They're the ones where both people are committed to growing together. One of the most beautiful things about life is that we are constantly evolving. I always say that we're constantly changing, and I love it. I love that we're able to, kind of be like a butterfly a lot, and we're constantly evolving. And with that evolution, our relationships also evolve, right? That's just natural. You change, your relationships change, your circumstances change, and sometimes those shifts deepen your connections, and then sometimes they reveal that it's time to lovingly let go of some relationships. Today, we're going to explore what healthy relationships really look like from my perspective, right? Like everybody has their own perspective. I'm not anybody's psychologist, but I am giving you advice that has worked for me. How setting boundaries creates those stronger connections, not weaker ones. Yeah, boundaries is a big topic. I know it's a buzzword now, but it's real and people have them. We're also going to explore why people sometimes resist our growth, why our growth gets uncomfortable for other people, and how we can navigate that with grace. The power of appreciative inquiry. So asking empowering questions to nurture our relationships. And then we'll talk about that one thing that elephant in the room, why we can't always bring everyone with us. And I think Tyler Perry said, everyone can't breathe at the same altitude, but how to honor the role they have played in our journey. So let's celebrate growth, honor, connection, and step fully into the relationships that serve our highest good. I think the best relationships were the ones that lasted the longest. That's what I used to think. I always thought that, and I will tell you why. I am a relationship girl. I have had my relationships are generally long term, including my friendships. So that's what I had in my head. But what I've come to realize that longevity isn't really the goal. The goal is more around alignment, understanding people's boundaries, understanding, where people are in life and how you can pour into them and how they can pour into you. I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to tell this story about a few years ago. I had a friendship that had been a really huge part of my life. But as I started stepping into new goals, embracing new perspectives, and then prioritizing my self-care, which is a part of my self-care is definitely boundaries, I noticed something. Our conversations started to feel different, and not in a bad way, but in a way that made me realize we were evolving. We were in different places, right? We were in those different places. We were either in the different place or we were headed to the different place, but whatever it was, it felt different. And at first I questioned myself, what's wrong with me? Am I the one being distant? And was I asking too much out of the relationship? Were they asking too much? But then I reframed the question to be one of more gratitude. And I started to say, okay, what is this relationship taught me, or what is it teaching me, and how is it serving me, and how is it serving the other person? So kind of looking at it like that, not that there's something wrong, but what is it teaching me and where does it serve me in my life? And that's when I saw the lesson. It wasn't about blame. It was about evolution. It's about evolution. It generally, from what I've seen as an adult, that's generally how people fall out, is either, well, sometimes it's egregious disrespect, but I have not seen that in my circle. But generally you see people, either miscommunication, or instead of just thinking about it as an evolution, we're we parted ways because, there has to be this grandstand reason, and the grandstand reason can just really be truly an evolution. A healthy relationship with whether it's with a friend or a partner or a family member or even a colleague, the good ones for me feel like home. They feel like a space where I'm allowed to grow, evolve and to dream without fear of being judged and held back. I have literally psychological safety. We talk about that a lot at work. It's in organization development, psychological safety, but it still carries you into relationships with people outside of work, because the ones you have learning it about are relationships too. They're just professional. But psychological safety, just being able to be without fear of being judged or held back, no stupid questions, just that's home. It's the feeling of mutual growth where people are pouring into each other, not because they have to, but because they want to. And I had said this previously, you can't pour from an empty cup. So you need those people that are able to pour into that cup. You're not in competition, you're in collaboration. You celebrate each other's wins, you push each other to reach higher goals. And even when life gets tough, you don't run, you rise together. And then trust. That's the foundation of relationships. You know how it is. Like once the trust is broken, it is extremely hard to get that back. Whether it be a romantic relationship, friends, work, once the trust is broken, it is really hard to recover. And in it, trust in a healthy relationship does allow you to exhale and breathe like, oh my gosh, this is home, right? This is home. When I have that trust, I don't have to second guess how someone feels about me or how I'm coming across. I don't have to shrink myself or walk on eggshells, because that's not happening. That eggshell walking, that is a thing of the 90s, because I'm just not doing it. I'm not working on eggshells, and I'm not going to, as an adult, try to sit and guess what's wrong with somebody. Like I care, I want to understand, but I also, if you tell me nothing, I'm going to assume it's nothing because I'm not a mind reader. But when you can show up as your fully authentic, unapologetic self, and you feel seen, loved, and valued, that is that psychological safety that is just incredible. Then let's talk about reciprocity, right? A relationship doesn't have to be perfectly balanced at all times. I learned this in marriage, but it's true in friendship. It's true at work. There will be some seasons where you can give more, right? There's some seasons where you can give more. And then there's some seasons where you receive more. But at its core, there's an understanding that both parties are invested in the relationship, right? So there's times where I know in my marriage, like there are days where I'm like, all I can give you is 20. 20 is all I got. I had a rough day at work. Only can give 20. That doesn't mean there's other times where I don't give 80 and he gives 20, or I don't give 50 and he gives 50. You know what I mean? It's just not that kind of balance. But at the core, we are both invested in our relationship. And then finally, there's the joy, there's the ease. I'm not saying relationships won't take work, because they absolutely do. But work and struggle are two different things. I'm not struggling. I'm not struggling. Now, I will tell you, I am a marriage. I love being married to my husband, and I love the union of marriage. But struggling in a relationship, that is where, in a relationship I choose to have, that's where I draw the line. You're choosing relationships now. This isn't kids where you just go to high school with a bunch of people and you have to be friends with them. Struggling, I can't do. A relationship, a healthy one, shouldn't feel like it's a burden, or it should feel like it's a partnership. So even life throws us challenges. There's a sense of peace in knowing that you're navigating them together as a unit, as friends, as two parties in a relationship. And when you experience a relationship like that, that's when you know it's not about finding perfect people. Like, I don't want no perfect people, perfect for me, but it's about finding the people who align with you, what you're going through, and who genuinely want to see you win. They want to see you win. When your back is turned, they want to see you win. When you're looking at them, they want to see you win. They're clapping for you. They're standing up. They want to see you win. But what happens when a relationship does start to feel different? What happens when you're growing, but you're not sure if the relationship is growing with you? It happens. That's that evolution. It's easy to focus on what has changed, though, and to ask, why is the relationship the same anymore? But I want to challenge you to reframe it a way that I have tried lately. And instead of seeing change as a loss, it's an evolution, right? It's an evolution. What if instead of asking, why is the relationship shifting, we're talking about how is the relationship helped me grow? Because even if the relationship changes and it no longer serves us or the same purpose, That doesn't mean that it never did. It doesn't mean that it didn't have value. You have to be able to recognize that as well. And I say all this because all of these things about relationships, they carry us. They're the behind the scenes of our life. They carry us through life. These relationships that we have professionally and personally with people. And, sometimes a shift in my mindset of loss to a mindset of gratitude, it has opened me up to having more deeper, fulfilling relationships. Instead of holding on to the what was, we make space for the what can be. And that's when real connection starts. That's where real peace and love really exist there. After we acknowledge how relationships evolve, because we know they do, and how gratitude can shift our perspective, we talk about what comes next. That famous word that everybody's talking about, boundaries. I know I have friends that have laughed at me about my boundaries. I do have boundaries, and they don't make me, people hear it as a bad thing or like it's a wall or something. Boundaries help us all survive in the relationship, right? Because recognizing the value of the relationship is one thing, but ensuring that relationship continues in a healthy way requires that intentional action of having boundaries and communicating them. One of the greatest acts of love you can have for both yourself and other people in relationships is setting clear, respectful boundaries. And boundaries are not shutting people out. Like, no, that's not it. And I think that just like DEI, boundaries has gotten overused and has gotten distorted. They create structure of mutual respect, understanding, and longevity in our relationship. That's what boundaries do. And they have worked effectively for me. Some boundaries are set, and like I said earlier, clear, respectful boundaries, but some boundaries are just understood, right? And I know a lot of people think boundaries are walls, but really they are bridges. They say, I value this relationship enough to communicate what I need so that we can thrive together in the relationship. And let's be real, a relationship where both people feel heard and respected is way more fulfilling where one person feels they're constantly overextending themselves. Think about this. Wouldn't you rather have a friendship where both of you feel respected instead of one person always feeling depleted? A relationship won't survive that depletion because that other person is going to eventually need someone to pour into them, right? So if one party's feeling depleted, it's just not a relationship that's going to flourish. It's facts. But wouldn't you rather be in a relationship, say romantic relationship, where both partners choose each other every day, but not out of obligation, but because the space they share is built on mutual care and respect and boundaries? Setting boundaries isn't about rejecting people. It's about honoring yourself while giving the relationship the best chance of being healthy. If I communicate my needs and you respect them, our relationship just gets stronger. But if I communicate my needs and you ignore them, that tells me everything I need to know. And the other part of that is like, a friend of mine, if there is something that if I'm not pouring into you, I would love to understand, like, what does that look like for us? What am I taking and I'm not pouring back into? So I believe in communicating your unmet needs with your relationships, your husband, your relationship with your friends, your relationship at work. Communicate your unmet needs. Now that we understand why behind boundaries and why they're essential, why they strengthen relationships rather than weaken them, it's time to explore how we approach them. Because setting boundaries is one thing, but communicating them in a way that fosters understanding and growth is just as important. For many of us, the moment we start setting boundaries, we're met with resistance, right? Maybe a friend says, oh, so now you're too busy for me. Maybe a family member makes a passive aggressive comment. Oh, you've changed. That's a big one. You've changed. Or maybe at work, when you stop overextending yourself, people start acting differently towards you. It's easy to get discouraged. And it's easy to feel like you want to be liked. That's a normal human reaction. Nobody wants to be not liked. So it is easy for that, but it's easy to ask, why do people push back when I set boundaries? Why can't they respect my boundaries? But if we reframe that, right? And this is coming from the place of gratitude, instead of focusing on the why people react negatively, maybe asking, how can I communicate my boundaries in a way that strengthens my relationship? This question then shifts our mindset from frustration to empowerment. Instead of seeing pushback as an attack, like you're not respecting my boundaries, we start seeing it as an opportunity to reinforce our values, deepen our mutual respect, and show up in our relationships with greater clarity. Um, you know, I say that practical ways to communicate boundaries with clarity. These are some of mine. Communicating boundaries with clarity and intention. Lead with love. Instead of saying, I don't have time for this, try, I really value our time together and I want to be fully present. Let's plan something when I can give you my full energy. That changes the game. It changes it to where you're not making the person sound like a burden and you're saying, look, I value our time, but I'm not fully present right now. Let's get a time on the calendar that works for both of us. Being clear and direct. Boundaries don't need long explanations. And as adults, I know one of the things my mom used to say is like, I ain't explaining myself to anybody. Well, you have to sometimes you just have to explain yourself. Unless you work for yourself, you have to explain yourself. I have to explain myself to my husband, but you don't have to explain long about boundaries. Instead, you can just say, I just have a lot going on. I don't know if I can. Or try, I can't commit to that right now, but I appreciate you thinking of me. Those are ways to, really directly say your boundary, but having a little love behind it. And one of my go-tos is when I can't really help somebody, I always say, well, can we help another time? That's one of the things that I do because I don't mind helping, but right now I just can't help, right? Then staying firm, but being open. Not everyone's going to understand your boundaries right away. And that's okay. Instead of getting defensive, try asking, does this boundary feel clear to you? I want to make sure we're on the same page. Now, I will say, sometimes people ain't trying to hear that shit, right? Like people are not, they just aren't trying to hear. So does this boundary feel clear to you? My friends would be like, does this boundary feel clear to me? But I may say it some way different. Like, is that clear? Or do you understand why that can't happen? Or, that's how I may explain it. But does this boundary feel clear to me? I wrote it and I'm reading it. And I'm like, okay, it doesn't sound like something that you would say generally. Then we lead with intention, that invitation for growth. When we lead with that intention and clarity, we invite others to do the same. I know some people may need time to adjust, but those that truly value us will rise to the occasion. They do. So instead of asking, why are they resisting? Ask yourself, how can I guide this conversation in a way that strengthens our connection? Because boundaries aren't just about protection. They're about building stronger, healthier, and fulfilling relationships. All right, now we're going to explore like the why people say you've changed. That growth. I used to watch Sex and the City, and I remember clear as day, there was the episode where Carrie was going to move to Paris, and Cynthia Nixon, who played Miranda, and her were leaving a funeral, and Cynthia Nixon did not like the Russian guy that she was dating, and they were walking, and Cynthia Nixon communicated to her that she didn't want her to leave. And Carrie said, I cannot stay single in New York for you. And I always remember that of an evolution of that character. I was digging deep into this because it definitely, Sex and the City resonated with me and my friends. I don't know if anybody else out there, 90s teenagers and young adults, but Sex and the City was great. But that was to me like this evolution of her growth, right? Like she evolved at that point, was like, I can't stay here just for you. And her friend did not want to see her change, because when we evolve, we sometimes trigger something in people around us. It's not always that they don't support us, right? Like that's not always it. It's sometimes that they haven't stepped into their own growth yet, or change, the pure change of it all. Change, people can say, oh, I adapt to change easily. That was like one of the number one things people put on resumes like last year. They are flexible, adaptable, agile. But the bottom line is change. People don't like change. And when something changes about your life and either theirs is the same or it doesn't change for their benefit, sometimes people just get very uncomfortable with that. And here's the thing, that's okay. Everyone is on their own timeline. Everybody's growth is on their own timeline, but that doesn't mean you have to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable. And I said this about loving yourself first and self-love. You don't have to. Why do I have to shrink myself to make you feel better? That's a you problem. That's some you shit. It's not some me shit. But, I say that because it is something that when we get older and we start to evolve, you do see that. And it's easy for you to get defensive, but you do have to honor those relationships past relationships while moving forward, if that is where, we're headed. Not everyone is meant to come with you in your next chapter. They're just not. I say that I'm very lucky that I have some really lovely friends. I'm blessed to have some really great friends, a great circle in my life. But there have been relationships that just couldn't take the journey with me. They just, for some reason, they weren't meant to come along on the next chapter. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a valuable relationship or it wasn't a valuable friendship. Instead of feeling guilty, I asked myself, and I would, recommend you do the same. What did this relationship teach me? How can I take the good from this and apply it to my future connections? And then how can I let go with love rather than resentment? Because people get it wrong. Like, they go about it all wrong. You do not have to fall out with somebody for things to just not be in the same place. Now, I think you should communicate with them, because I think that's just unfair to both of you if you have a relationship and it just stopped being what it is and nobody really knows what happened. And communicating that can be, some closure for everybody. But I don't think that when people stop, they go their separate ways and they distance themselves, there has to be resentment there. And I think what happens, and I'm just guessing, again, I'm not a psychologist, but I think that sometimes what happens is that resentment and anger is easier than clarity and communication. It's just easier to be mad and be like, shit, I am, that's easier than to actually do the work. When we view relationships as experiences that shape us, oh my gosh, rather than something we lose, we appreciate them even more. And that's why I will say I never regretted any guy that I ever dated. I don't ever regret that. I'm like Ariana Grande and thank you next. Like, I do not, I do not ever regret that, because those relationships turned me into the woman that I am today and the wife that I am to my husband today. Those relationships were important. Your first love is important. Even if those relationships, as they have, even when they evolve into something else, we appreciate them more and more as we use them as, or view them as, relationships that help shape the people that we are. I'm going to have an appreciative inquiry moment. When we talk about this, instead of saying, I wish this relationship stayed the same, ask, how can I show gratitude for what it was? It's easy to go kind of on the negative end of it and say, why didn't it stay the same, or why can't things be the same? But you get something out of that relationship. And so have that gratitude and then embrace what's next. The shift in perspective makes all the difference. So Queens, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this conversation, it's this: growth is beautiful. Relationships are beautiful. And even when things shift, it's not about losing people. It's about gaining deeper alignment with yourself and others. As you move forward, I challenge you to set boundaries with love and confidence. Choose relationships that nourish your spirit and your soul. Appreciate the lessons from every connection, past and present. And most importantly, give yourself permission to evolve unapologetically. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's one relationship lesson that has shaped your journey? Comment and share. Until next time, keep growing, keep loving, and keep reigning like the queen you are. I will see you next week.